There are places on this earth that exist just outside the realm of reality, places where time itself seems to stretch, twist, and break. If you've ever found yourself on a road that leads to nowhere, I am sure you VA cross paths with one of them. My story starts one evening after a long drive through the back roads of nowhere. My friend Nick and I were traveling across the country, nothing special. Just a road trip to clear our heads and escape the routine of life. By the time we pulled off the highway and saw the motel, it was nearly midnight. The sky was a canvas of black and gray, and there wasn't a soul in sight. The motel stood at the edge of the road, its faded neon sign casting a dim red glow. It looked like something you'd find in an old horror film, forgotten, untouched, abandoned by time, the kind of place you see in the background but never think to stop it. But when you're veering on the road, as long as we had the idea of a warm bed and a roof over your head, seemed too tempting to pass up. "Look at this place," Nick muttered, glancing at the sign. "Seems like it has been closed for years." But the parking lot was full. There were cars parked all around, none of them new, but none of them old either. They all looked strange in the dim light, as though they had just appeared there out of nowhere. I shrugged it off, trying to focus on the need for rest. Maybe I'll find a decent place to sleep at least. We parked the car and made our way to the office. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of something ancient, something forgotten. An elderly man sat behind the desk. His face was hidden in the shadows, his hand shaky as he flipped through a stack of papers. He barely acknowledged us when we walked in room 9. He grunted, sliding the key across the counter. "Don't make any noise." We didn't ask any questions. We just took the key and headed down the hallway. The halls were narrow and quiet, eerily so. The wooden floors creaked under our feet, and the walls had a yellowish tint to them, as if the years had seeped into the very bones of the motel. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting long, unnatural shadows across the hallway. When we reached room 9, the door opened with a soft moan, as though it hadn't been touched in ages. The room inside was small, decorated in an odd mix of outdated furniture and faded wallpaper. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, its weak glow barely illuminating the space. The air felt heavy in the room, as if something was pressing down from above. It wasn't tea. Until we noticed the clocks that the unease began to settle in. There were 4 clocks on the wall, each placed in different corners of the room. They all looked the same, old-fashioned, analog clocks with brass hands and cracked glass, but there was something odd about them. The first clock on the left was ticking slowly, out of sync with the others. The second clock on the right was stuck at exactly 2:14. The third clock above the bed was ticking a little too fast, its hands spinning in a strange dance. And the fourth clock above the window was completely still, its hands frozen at 3:05. "These clocks are messed up," Nick said, eyeing the fourth one. "What the hell, none of them match?" I nodded, the unease creeping over me like a cold fog. But we were tired, and I convinced myself that it was just the weird atmosphere of an old motel playing tricks on us after all. What? That's a clock, really, but a piece of machinery. We both went to bed that night. I woke up at exactly 3:05 a.m. I didn't know what pulled me from my sleep, but when I opened my eyes, the room was bathed in darkness. I reached over to turn on the lamp, but it didn't work. The faint light from outside filtered through the cracks in the blinds, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. I turned to Nick. He was still asleep, or so I thought. Then I heard it, a soft, steady ticking. The clocks. I looked at the wall. The fourth clock, the one that had been frozen at 3:05, was now ticking. Slowly but steadily, it was moving. Tick, tick, tick. I sat up, my breath catching in my throat. The ticking grew louder. All the clocks, they were all ticking now, but not in unison. One was fast, one was slow, and one was completely erratic. And then there was the fourth one, ticking at its own pace, the wrong pace. Suddenly I heard something else, a faint whisper just beyond the door. At first I thought it was the wind, but it didn't. Sound like wind. It sounded like voices, low murmurs, like they were coming from the walls themselves. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a warning. The ticking stopped. The room fell silent as silent as. When I noticed it, the faintest shimmer in the air, just by the window, a ripple like a heat wave on a hot day. Normal. And then the clocks stopped, all of them at once. But the silence didn't last long. The air grew colder and the lights flickered once more, and then something in the hallway moved. It wasn't the creak of the floorboards or the wind rattling the windows. It was something else, something heavier, a presence. I shot out of bed and grabbed my jacket. Waking Nick in the process. Get up now, I whispered, urgently shaking him, but when he looked at me, his eyes were wide and filled with fear. Do you hear that? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't need to ask what he meant. The sounds in the hallway were growing louder, the whispering more distinct, and then just as I was about to open the door and leave, a soft voice whispered directly behind me. Liv. I spun around, but there was no one there. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the clocks on the wall, they were still frozen in place. Something was wrong with this place. We bolted out of the room and into the hallway, but as we turned the corner toward the exit, we froze. Every door in the hallway was open, and inside each room was nothing, just darkness, but the faint outline of something moving in the shadows. Watching us. Then, suddenly the power went out. We rushed for the front door, but it was locked. There was no way out. We tried to call for help, but our phones were dead. We could hear it now, the steady, relentless ticking of the clocks. All of them, tick, tick, tick. That was the last thing I remember before the lights came back on, and when they did, we were no longer in the hallway. We were in the lobby. The elderly man behind the desk wasn't there anymore. There was no sign of anyone, just the clocks. All of them frozen at the exact same time. Silver Creek Motel. I don't know how long we were there. I don't even know if we ever really left.